All right, well, we'll go ahead and start this work session of the Wyoming Business Council Board of Directors and team working together here. We are going to take roll, but they're just a reminder that there is no public action that will be taken by the board today and no public involvement from the outside. You can watch and be part of it. We will be going into some breakout sessions, so it's possible that you won't be able to hear anything while we're in the work session. We will come back in here, and for those folks that might be joining on Zoom, it's going to be, well, it's not going to be the same as if you were in person. Let's just say it like that. And so with that, we will let Courtney take roll.
Thank you. Mr. Arns, Ms. Atkinson, Mr. Brown is excused, Ms. Chatterton, Ms. Crumpton, Ms. Downham, Mr. Lance, Mr. Law, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Pivick, Dr. Schaefer, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Worthen.
Thanks, Courtney. And thanks everybody for being here. We have a pretty full house, so this is really, really good. I'd like to just kind of open up today by talking a little bit about how we're working to be bold. One of the things that we have done, and you've probably seen if you've been on the board for a while, is you've seen a continual evolution of the work that we do at the Business Council. You've seen a number of shapes. You've seen things like a flywheel or a cartwheel. It's your call. Mr. Lance is going to be doing cartwheels later. We have a gym just for you, sir, and crash pads. No spotters though. But in all reality, we have been working for the last few years on how do we develop a structure that will allow us to solve bigger problems, understand the problems and the depth that they have, and then create the programs and the policies and the investments that will actually begin to address those. And we've been doing that in a way that is what I would call is it's a cycle of continuous improvement and continual understanding and learning of the problem. And where we are today is actually, I think it's super exciting, because where we are today is we know something that we maybe didn't know a few years ago. And that is what we're doing today is not enough. And to me, that's super exciting, because what it says is the activities in our economy are not enough to create a high quality of life for the people who live here and the people who want to live here. And that's the problem that we're working to solve. And what's so exciting about it, it's not that it's disparaging about the past or saying that what we've done isn't right. It's saying that we now can do more, and we have to do more if we're going to get where we want to go, which is an economy that we can all be proud of, that will continue to propagate and make our economy available to those folks in the future. And so the exciting part is we get to start working on a little bit more of that today with some big ideas. I'm going to tell you right now, some of those ideas you're going to say, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure if that's what we should be doing. And that's okay. That's part of the process. But a lot of analysis has gone into that. A lot of analysis will continue. We're not at the end, we're sort of at the beginning. And one of the things that I would like to ask all of you to do is to not be a part of the staff or board today. I would like you to be on Team Wyoming, because in my mind, that's what we are anyway. And it's not just those maybe 50 or so of us in the room. It's much bigger than that. But today we're all on Team Wyoming. And so we are going to do some breakout sessions. We're going to work together as a team, not as, oh, they're on the board or gosh, they're on the staff or any of that stuff. We're all on Team Wyoming. And really the thing that I would say to our board is that you've always given that impression that you were a part of our team and you are here for Team Wyoming. The relationship that I think our team has with the board and that is really like a team, and we all kind of see our roles. But I think today, where we are and where we're going, need us to be kind of the center of that snowflake. And this is a really good opportunity for us to do that. So before we break into some groups and do some fun things, all right. So one of the things that we thought we would do is just talk a little bit about what we know, what we maybe don't know, what we're working on, and where we need to go from here. And so we'll go ahead and jump through a few slides, just kind of give everybody a feel for what's been happening. We believe our job is to reverse economic decline in Wyoming. That's what we feel the Wyoming Business Council is intended to do, is reverse economic decline. If you're not convinced that the state is in economic decline, it's possible that you haven't seen a GDP graph for a while, and you haven't been paying attention to most of our stuff, because it is. And it's a truth that we're not afraid of, we're not scared of, and we don't want to run from it. We actually want to lead it head on, because if we don't, then we'll just continue to propagate the status quo, and that's not working. We think there are two things that are really important to reversing economic decline in the state. One is to increase the number of jobs and job quality that we have in the state, and the other is to increase workers and participation in the workforce. If you think about that, we want to make it so that people have an outstanding wage that allows them the freedom economically to lead a good life, to create families, to be able to utilize that money in their towns. And we also want to make sure that we are making the most of our workforce. So a lot of the work we're doing is around that. One of the really small examples of us doing that is saying it's just not good enough to meet county median wage for a BRC project. We feel like it should be much higher than that. We should look at national wages and compare them. We should be a place where people want to come, not have to stay. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about our causes of decline. The thing that is challenging is that stagnant job and wage growth. And we also know that the availability of workforce is a challenge. And so we've kind of broken this down into a little bit more of a root cause analysis. And we've said, and here are some examples of those, is that we know that we're falling behind our peers in knowledge sector jobs. We know that typically high wage industries, those wages in Wyoming are decreasing. These are pieces of data that we can't really argue. They are what they are. And so we have to say, well, why are we doing that? What is happening that's causing those problems? Well, we know that knowledge intensive companies move, and then they expand elsewhere. So they may start here, but we're seeing them expand elsewhere. Some of the YVC ventures that we've gone into started here in Wyoming and found they got to a spot and they needed something different. And they had to go somewhere else to get that. That's a challenge. We see that happen, not just in those that we've invested in, but we see that happen for entrepreneurial and high growth companies all the time. And it's something that we want to reverse. We want to allow those companies to stay. We also know that housing is a big issue for workforce. And so we're going to talk about a couple different things in housing today and really kind of think about how we break these problems up and start to begin to solve them, because it turns out that without workforce, your firm can't expand. And if you don't have the complexity in your jobs that allow them a great enough wage or allows them flexibility and mobility within their career, they're likely going to go try to find it somewhere else. And so those are two big areas that we're really working on. Now, I also like to think about this like the barrel. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the idea of a barrel. Sometimes we talk about things like building blocks, and if you put these things on the bottom of the foundation, then you can build on top of that and build and so on and so forth. We like to think of it as a barrel because we think about binding constraints. And the way it works is, if you think about a barrel can only hold as much water as the lowest stave on the barrel. So wherever the lowest stave is, That is what we call your binding constraint. And we know that there are some challenges that Wyoming has: infrastructure, disconnectedness or lack of agglomeration, housing, youth outmigration, childcare, and job complexity. Those are challenges that Wyoming has. And what we have to understand is which one is the lowest in a given community. Because it turns out that when we're working throughout the state, we are working in a given community. We can look at this statewide, but each community faces these challenges somewhat differently. And each community actually might have a lower stave on the barrel than another. So a blanket approach is probably not going to work. So we think about binding constraints like this. Now, what happens is as you build up one of those staves, maybe you build it up enough where another stave is then the lowest. We have to be able to move to that next problem to solve it, because we can go crazy and get the one stave all the way to the top. It doesn't help the volume of the barrel. And so this is the model that we use to determine what to work on in a given community or throughout the state, okay? So this model works really, really well if you have really good bands on the barrel. So if you look at the barrel, you have the staves, and then you have bands that hold them together. One of the challenges that we face in Wyoming is that we actually don't have some of the bands that are required. And so those bands are that we don't necessarily have the know-how to solve our own problems at a local level or even at the state. We also know that our fiscal system, the lowest band of the barrel, incentivizes decline. Some of you are like, well, that can't be. That's not true. It is. It is actually true. Our communities don't have more resources when they grow in terms of people. When their population increases, the resources they have essentially stays the same and ultimately goes lower per capita. So that means that you don't incentivize growth. You incentivize not stagnation either, because what happens is you do better if your population shrinks. That's a weird place to be, especially if you're all about economic growth. The other thing is that we don't have a system that locals can fund their own growth. So the state funds growth, but the local communities can. Now, what this all means is that the systems that we have today are really challenging to overcome. So create a barrel with a bunch of different stave lengths and no bands. It's hard to hold water, right? That model doesn't. But this is the challenge that we are working on. And this is the challenge that actually gets me super excited about what we can do. Because the good news is we get to design this. We know what doesn't work. Now we get to design what will. We're going to take a look at two very specific programs or efforts that worked on a particular area of what I would call the deeper problem that we have in Wyoming. And so YVC, or Wyoming Venture Capital, as we call it, is a program that was designed to break a chicken and egg problem. So one of the things that we love to do more than anything is get chicken and egg problems. Most people think chicken and egg problems are unsolvable. We like to break eggs and cook chickens. That's just what we do, okay? They're tasty. Because we don't feel like it's for us to go, oh, let's describe the problem and walk away. No, our problem is not that. We want to go in and say, okay, what if we put pressure on one half of the system? And so YVC is a really classic example of a chicken and egg problem. So in the venture world in Wyoming, prior to this experiment, we heard this. Bert worked for a year solid understanding this problem. And what he heard was there's not enough deal flow in Wyoming to attract capital. And then he also heard there's not enough capital in Wyoming to attract deal flow. That is a chicken and egg problem. So we could have punted and said, well, it is what it is. That's not what we do. Instead, we said, let's take a federal program and pump $58 million into the VC landscape and see if that will attract more deal flow. It did. It has attracted deal flow. It's attracted additional capital. It has created churn that we need. It's also highlighted the fact that we are still losing those firms that grow, that start here and grow to other states. It happens. It doesn't happen a ton, but it has happened already. So we are, again, here's the challenge with a very complex problem, is you solve part of it and all you do is learn about more of it. And that's just part of the process. You bet. Come on up. You need to use the mic. Yeah. Come on up, Sarah. Be careful.
State track. I don't think I made state this year. Yeah, so just to put a super fine point on this and connect these two analogies. So we recognized that we had two low staves on the barrel in our startup ecosystem, capital and deal flow. And so we said, which one can we break to try to break this cycle? And we had an opportunity to break that with capital. It turns out that that worked, and we had more deal flow than our capital could even handle at that point. So we broke that problem. But what that did is it uncovered the next problem. So when we see these companies leaving, that's not failure for us, that's learning for us, and that's actually a success. So we solved one problem. We have to keep that stave high, but now we're on to the next one. So we're making progress where our bucket is getting filled more and more, but we have to solve that next problem to get higher.
Should keep going.
No.
So if anybody wants, like, let's say I'm going along here and you raise your hand and just say Sarah, she will square it. Okay. Which is totally cool. I love that. So YVC is an experiment that we're continuing to run. Now, the beautiful thing about, if you remember back to like high school chemistry, is that usually in 1 or 2 class periods, you had some results and you could probably either prove or disprove your hypothesis. The good news is here is that we have like 9 years. Okay, that's how long this experiment is going to run. Now we're probably going to know a lot of things early on in the first couple years, which we do, but that experiment is going to take some time. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember that you have probably heard about YVC a bunch of times. But the world outside of us has not heard all of the things about YVC probably enough. In fact, it's really our job to make sure that people do hear about it. And it's our job to make sure that those folks that we might come into contact with in our other lives, especially as board members, understand the things that we're doing. Because it turns out that those chicken and egg problems are the ones that most folks sort of say, well, it is what it is. And I think that's an opportunity for us to step in and go, yeah, we thought that too. But what we realize is that's an opportunity. Those places where you say it is what it is, that's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to put forth a hypothesis, then test that hypothesis, and realize it might take a while, but we will come to some results and some learning. And as Sarah mentioned, the beautiful thing is that you learn pretty fast, and then you start working on something else and you learn more about that. And this is not a problem that has one answer. More capital is not the answer to this. We don't get to say, well, we put more capital in and walk away. This is a problem, just like every one of the problems that we face, that has many reasons it exists. And all we're doing with this experiment likely is understanding the next thing that we need to work on. And so we don't get to say, we're done. We put in money and now it's gone, because that's just not the way problems work. Okay? That's the way humans think they work, but it's not how problems actually work. And so we're going to continue to put that investment in. We're going to utilize all of that 58 million, and then we're going to go work on the other things that we uncover along the way. So as our team and board is out there, I do want to make sure that everyone understands it's our responsibility to help people when they say, yeah, but didn't we already solve that? And we might have to sit down with a cup of coffee and say, oh, we would love that, except that that's not the way it works. A lot of times we throw Band-Aids on things. A lot of times we throw ideas at something. We say, oh, well, that's done. It's solved. They haven't been solved yet, or we wouldn't be standing here talking about this, okay? The next one is about workforce participation, and especially the amount of workforce that we have in our system today. And this one goes back to housing. There are many, there are no monocausal reasons for the challenges that we face. But housing is an issue that we know we face. And of course, when we first started talking about housing, everybody said, oh, it's the cost of materials. Oh, it's developers don't want to be here. And it is what it is. And we said, well, wait a second, is it really that? And so we started to dig really deep. And what we found was that it wasn't cost of materials at all. In fact, the cost of materials, and this is heartbreaking to developers, I'm sure, in Wyoming, they're about the same as they are other places when adjusted for the things that you adjust for. So that's not the issue. It turns out that it's regulatory environment. There are way too many regulations in Wyoming communities, and there isn't arterial infrastructure that's available to do that. So that means that the certainty and the cost are prohibitive. Well, businesses love certainty, and businesses would prefer lower costs. So if they can get those other places, guess what? They're not going to do it here. Not good businesses. Okay. So we started working closely with a number of communities where this was an issue. And one of those communities, it happened to be Cheyenne, where the mayor is incredibly excited about housing, and he should be. And he probably knows more about housing than any other person in the state. He really does. He's dug really deep on that. And so we've worked together with him to come up with some strategies to reduce the regulation, to make it easier for infrastructure, so that he can attract development and he can put more beds in Cheyenne, because he knows that that is a binding constraint. In his estimation and in ours, that is the lowest stave on the barrel. And because of the work that he's done, and our team has helped out with, but mostly because of the work he's done with the city council, the work he's done in the community itself, they've taken a really hard look at housing and they've made some changes. Now, again, we can't and we wouldn't take credit for all those changes, but his work on that will make it so that I think there are like 3 times more. Is that what it says? 3 times as many housing units in Cheyenne this year than normal. And if you do a comparison of Cheyenne versus other communities, let's just say one that's maybe 40 to 45 miles away, depending on where you live in that community, it's dramatically different, the number of housing units that are put in from one community to the other. Yet sometimes we say, oh, well, we solved that problem. We did the work. We fixed our regulations. But if the problem actually doesn't change, you didn't. And that's something that we're working on again in those communities. It's just that some communities may be a little further along than others, but we've got to continue to facilitate those. And I think that is it's a really important thing. Do you know how much money we've pumped into Cheyenne for housing? Take a guess. Yeah, your silence is because you know the answer. It's zero. We have paid for no housing projects. Well, there's one that's in the works still. It's been from many years ago, 6, 7 years ago. Someday it'll happen. But for all of these things, that project didn't go anywhere. But for all of these things, 3 times the housing, what did we do? We worked on policies. We worked on regulation. We solved a problem that didn't require money, which also is a really good thing for our state to understand. That money doesn't solve all those problems. Sometimes it just makes them worse. And so I think it's really important for us to think about that as we start to look at the bigger things that we can do, that there are some opportunities that don't have to have ridiculous amounts of money. There are some opportunities that might require us to rethink what we thought. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not enough. We have, and we will continue to make our programs, our investments, our policies as effective as possible. No doubt about it. We will continue to do that. It's just, if you look around this room and as you talk to the folks who are working on this problem every day, they're driven by what can I do to make it better? So we're going to continue to do that. But we could work forever on the programs that we have, the money that we have, the policies that we have. It's not enough. We know we need to do more. These are a few things that we learned last fall. So last fall, we were in Laramie and had a nice session with a number of students to listen to a student's perspective of the things that they think are important. And as many of you will recall, we learned a few things, but we also confirmed some things that we know. Now, if you're involved in higher education, you probably know these things. Like you probably have worked on this and seen this in motion, no doubt about it. But one of the things that we heard from students is that the professional opportunities and the fact that there are ladders that they can climb make a difference in where they choose to live. And that job market strength retains them. Now, I do believe that there are some efforts that have been made and will be continued to be made by connecting students to the firms in Wyoming. I think that's one of the answers to the problem, or at least one of the hypotheses. How do we help our students know what's going on in Wyoming? Because we know there's a lot of exciting things going on in Wyoming. We know there are a lot of firms that are doing some great things and are looking for students and looking for young professionals to join their firms. And making that connection is a start. But we also know that we're not quite there yet and that we've got to continue on. Okay. We also know that this is a stat that you've probably heard me say. 60 to 70% of people born in Wyoming, by the time they're in the 30s, they leave Wyoming. And you think, yeah, but every student goes somewhere, right? My kids want to go another place. I have a daughter who moved to Santa Fe because she wanted to be part of the art scene, and there were opportunities in art there so that she could be a part of that scene and work in that environment. So gosh, Josh, let's not try to keep them all here. They all want to leave. They don't. The national average is around 30%. So that means that we lose about 40% more than the national average. That means it's beyond wanderlust. That means it's not just like youthful, I want to go out and see what the world is like. We lose way more than that, double, in fact. Now, to me, that sounds like a really good opportunity because it says to me that 30 or 40% of the people who are born in Wyoming actually want to stay here and can't. Well, guess what? That's a workforce that other states don't have because they actually want to be here. So when a firm comes to Wendy and says, yeah, but what's your workforce look like? She can be like, actually, we got a whole bunch of them. They really want to stay. And if you show up, they'll stay. That's a really good thing. Now, it might be spin just a little bit, but I think it's a good spin for us. Now, this is like a lot of stats. You can look at this in a lot of different ways, but when you compare our jobs and wages for those folks who have a tertiary education, ours tend to be lower than not having that education. Now, that's also an artifact of us having a pretty high wage in Wyoming. If you have a high school diploma, you can get a pretty high wage for a lot of the jobs in Wyoming. So there's some of that effect in there. But I think it's important to note that when you look at our peer states, you don't get a lot of return for your college education. So if I'm college educated and I'm a little bit like I've gone through enough to realize that, hey, I could get an ROI that's higher in Colorado than it is in Wyoming, I'm probably going to go do that. Now, for the most part, we all live in Wyoming. And so I want everyone to take this with a grain of salt because I share this irrationality with you. It is not rational to live in Wyoming if you have a college education based on this graph. It should be funnier. But it's not. And here's the thing. So where does irrationality come from? Irrationality comes from probably emotions. Like, we love it here. It is not rational. There's also something there. There's also something about Wyoming that we love. That's beyond money. That's beyond that career growth that's so important to some people. Now, we've all found that. And I think the idea is that we want others to be able to find that too. We want others to do that. And maybe they're not quite as irrational as us, right? Like, we want to kind of narrow the irrationality gap, which is not something that we want to probably promote, Wendy, but it is something that's important, that we have people who love it here and want to be here. But we also know from the basic data, not everybody's like that. Kids make decisions, young adults make decisions, older adults make decisions that mean they're going to go look for that rationality. Yet another chicken and egg problem that we have that we should talk a little bit about. Now, so we can't diversify because we don't have agglomeration. Now, agglomeration is essentially an economic idea that says you need proximity to people and you need a lot of different people so that your economy can be sustainable, so that your economy can grow on its own. You need more people than we have to have a diverse economy. But you have to have a diverse economy to have agglomeration. So there's a chicken and egg problem. Who else got a little bit hungry for either fried chicken or omelets? Did anybody else? It's right after lunch, so I'll give you a pass. But at the same time, who got excited about a really big problem, a really big chicken and egg problem? We could punt this one down the road and be like, oh, we've been trying to diversify forever. Yeah, well, our towns will never be greater than X tens of thousands of people. Right? We're in one of the largest cities in Wyoming, if not the largest city here in Casper. And people will say, well, it's just not going to get any bigger. Really? I disagree. I think it can. I think it should. Economically, we need it too. Is that controversial? Maybe. Is it our job to be status quo and milk toast? Nope. Our job is to create and get rid of the economic decline in Wyoming. Our job is a growth. That's what we're here for. And so this chicken and egg problem for us is like the problem. So there are a lot of dots on this graph. I'm not expecting you to see them all, but if you can see the blue dots, those are commuting zones in the United States. And then if you look at the orange dots, those are the ones that are in Wyoming. A commuting zone is basically a radius that contains people, a radius on the map, and it has some number of people inside it. Connor or Vinny, what's a typical commuting zone as it relates to this? How many miles radius? So as long as people will commute to work there, that is the commuting zone. So around Cheyenne, it might go down as far as like Loveland, might go up to Wheatland, that kind of thing. That's a commuting zone, wherever people will drive from to go to work in that area, okay? Well, if you look at this graph, what this graph will tell you is that if you want to increase the employment share in professional, scientific, and technical services employment, if you want to increase the number of people in those types of industries, you need to have a higher population in your commuting zone. What that means is we need more people. If we want to have a diverse economy with jobs that are complex enough for our young people and young people from other places to be attracted to it. Now, if we did that today, with the current fiscal system, let's just say we doubled the population of Casper in the professional, those knowledge working, scientific and technical jobs. Casper and the state of Wyoming could not sustain that doubling with its current fiscal system. Because our fiscal system, what does it do again? It incentivizes decline, yet we're pushing growth. Does anybody see a chicken and egg problem there? Hey, Phil, excited? Excited about that one? Who's excited about changing the revenue structure of Wyoming? Raise your hand. No, you're not excited about that? Let's try it again. Maybe you didn't hear me. Ben, if you need to turn that up a little bit, you can. Who's excited about changing the fiscal system in Wyoming? So much better. See, he's only took 2 times. Well, I'm glad you're excited about that, because that is definitely something that we're going to have to do. That is not a small feat. That's not why we're here, though, to do those little things. Just to quickly note, this is data you have all seen before, which is the services that people get, a family gets, are about, what is that, about almost 6 or 7 times what you pay in. What that means is we get a lot, but we don't pay a lot. Okay, somebody else pays for that. Most of us know where that comes from. Okay, but we think that those chicken and egg problems, those big problems, those big structural problems, the bands on the barrel are worth attacking. We believe that we could do that. I really think that we can change or influence the fiscal system in Wyoming. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we think we need to do. Now, one thing, and I think this is a really important thing for the members of Team Wyoming. These are big ideas. Okay, these are things that we've done some analysis on. Others have done analysis on. We're going to continue to analyze the cost benefit and all of those things. We are going to continue to. But I want you to just think about the scale of these ideas for a second. And these are just a few. But this is the scale of ideas the Wyoming Business Council should be thinking about. We should be thinking about a second university, 4-year university, or a medical school. That's the size of thing we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about a national lab. We should be thinking of rail from Denver to Billings with a little leg out to that one town I was telling you about off of Cheyenne. It's 45 miles. It's probably not going to cost that much. We should also be thinking about policy measures so that every community in the state, every county in the state pays 1 more cent of sales and use tax, and we can use it for economic development. We should be thinking about how do we have a higher match for BRC? How do we make that budget ask for BRC big enough to matter? And how do we change that fiscal system in Wyoming so that Wyoming is no longer beholden to only its current fiscal system, but actually benefits from human potential? How do we do that? Well, I actually believe that we can, and that's actually something that we're going to work on a little bit today. But just so you know, as we look at this, we're thinking of potential solutions, not to say that BRC projects are a bad thing, because typically speaking, the BRC projects that we do, so business ready communities projects, are great. They can change the landscape of a community. They can help instigate growth, but not at the level we need. It's not to say we shouldn't do those anymore. It's just to say that that's not going to be enough. So we need to elevate what we're thinking about. And some of these potential solutions are things that we're thinking about, we're analyzing, and we're looking at how do we get those done. Once you've done some work on generating those big ideas, you got to kind of winnow it down. And the other thing you got to do is you've got to, once you get it down to maybe some priorities, you got to take a really deep dive into what's the cost benefit. Now, again, what I will tell you is that we need to get to the level of big ideas that are so big that they sort of shock people. Not the ideas that people are gonna be like, yeah, whatever. No, the ideas that get people to argue about it in coffee shops. The big ideas where people are like, that sounds crazy to me. Because we can't really just do our job and create the growth in Wyoming's economy with these small adjustments. We're not there. And again, you could look at it as, oh, those are too big, or you could look at it as we're getting in on the ground floor of dramatic change in Wyoming. And really, people are looking for bold moves. They're looking for big changes. They don't want to argue about the little things we've been arguing about. They want to argue about the big things that are going to make a huge difference in our future. They want to argue about the things that seem irrational. After all, we've established we're all irrational. And because of that, I think we have to take the stand that says, we're going to be the ones that propose these bold ideas. We're going to be the ones that work on analyzing these and making sure that they work. And we're going to be the ones that develop the relationships to do that. So most of the ideas that you heard before are not new. People have probably stood in front of a group like this and said all of those ideas. Some of them have been voted on in the legislature. The reason that they maybe didn't happen wasn't because they're not good ideas, but because we didn't have the change space required to make them happen. We didn't have what it took in terms of ability, authority, or acceptance. So change space is actually what's going to get us there. And understanding the change space is going to help us work on the things that matter. Because you can analyze these things to death. You can put all the stats on a billboard that you want. You can do all of that stuff, and it's not going to matter. If you're solving a complex problem, change space is what matters. And what that means is that we have to think about the intersection of ability, authority, and acceptance. And only in that little bitty intersection of this Venn diagram do you have a positive change space. And so that means that if you don't have one of these or two of these or three of these, you don't have the ability to change. Now, chances are pretty good that if you think back to the things that you've tried to do in your life or in your career or others have as well, that at some level, ability, authority, or acceptance, one of those was missing. And again, maybe all three. So when we think about ability, it's pretty basic, right? What are the practical skills and resources needed to create the change? And do we have them on our team? Now, when I say on our team, I mean on our team of thousands, because it's not just about the 50 or so people in here. It's much bigger than that. We have a team that is bigger than that. When I think about authority, this one's a little bit different. Sometimes people think this is like who can sign the paper or things like that. It's a little bit different than that. I want you to think about the people who can envision change, articulate change, or support those people in power with that change. That's a little bit different than somebody signing off on something. I want you to look at this and say, who does that look like to you? If I had a mirror, I would hold it up. Because to me, it looks like us. It looks like people who can envision change. We can articulate the change, and we can actually support those folks in power to have the ability and the leadership to make that change. We can do that. I want you to think about acceptance for a minute and realize what we mean by acceptance. Who will need to change their behaviors for this change to happen? And are there groups that want this change to happen? Are there individuals, groups, or subgroups who actually want the change to happen? again, just to kind of walk through this, kind of describe this, but if you think about this, if you have these circles and they're not big enough to overlap, you don't have what it takes. That doesn't mean we just say, oh, bummer, we're out. No, it means that tells us what to work on. We don't have the ability, we should work on that. If we don't have the acceptance, we should work on that. If we don't have the authority, we should work on that. So all of those things, that just gives us an idea of what to work on. It doesn't make the problem unsolvable. It actually makes it more solvable. Okay, now on your table, you have some green dots and some red dots. I want everyone to go around. I think in this room, you'll see 5 or 6, 6 or 5? 5. There are five Venn diagrams. They all have authority, acceptance, and ability on them. And they all have things like the big ideas that I mentioned. So increasing connectivity, like transportation infrastructure, imagine rail all the way across, passenger rail all the way across Wyoming, up the I-25 corridor, let's say. Increased jobs for skilled people who are leaving with a medical school, a second university, or a national lab. The giant BRC budget ask, think hundreds of millions of dollars, approaching $1 billion. BRC community matches, so much so that probably no community could do it today. And statewide economic development tax. Those are the topics. What I want you to do with these stickers is I want you to take your stickers and I want you to go around and put green dots where you think we're doing pretty well in that circle, and a red dot where you think we're not doing well for that topic. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, I don't want you to debate the topic itself. Okay, the topic itself is off the table. The idea is, where do we have or not have the authority, acceptance, and ability? Good? Okay, how about if we do this? How about if we give you, until the big hand gets on the 11, let's go till 2:55 to walk around and do that, okay? All right, have fun. Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing that. That was a little bit of a warm-up exercise. It's gonna be pretty interesting, because now what we're gonna do is we are going to break into groups. You're in a group right now. If you are at a table, you should be at a table where your name is ish, okay? Unless Sarah asks you to move. If you are sitting down right now, stay there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work 2 of the items that we talked about. One is the medical school, and the other is the statewide economic development tax. And we're going to talk about both of those topics amongst your group. Now, what we want you to do is we're going to spend 30 minutes on each topic. Okay, and your facilitator, the folks at your table will know how to kind of do this, but we're going to spend 10 minutes talking about each authority, ability, and acceptance. For those 2 topics, you're going to first start with the medical school. Okay, we're going to start with that one. And you're going to describe why you chose a red dot or a green dot for each of those. So we'll start and we'll say, okay, I'll just use Ron as an example. I'll be Ron, and Ron will say, hey, everybody, what dot did you put for authority? And you're going to work on that. You're going to discuss that for 10 minutes. And then you're going to move to ability and acceptance. As you can do it in whatever order you want, as long as the word starts with an A. Then after that 30 minutes, you're going to move on to the statewide economic development tax and do the exact same thing. Does that make sense to everyone? We will help with time. Yeah. Amy and Sarah and sort of me will help with time. That's not my strong suit. Okay. All right. Amy, yeah, actually it's Amy's strong suit. That's right. At 3:30, you will stop talking about medical school. Okay. Heather. Oh, unless we want to they're just, I think we'll move just because it's going to get super loud in here with all these groups, right? So all of the facilitators you'll go to different areas, or you're going to stay here, Ron? Okay. All right, let's everybody go out because that's where your papers are, and there's tons of space you can use. Okay, you have 30 minutes. Okay, we're going to kick back off. And so if you can find your seats, please, we're going to go ahead and get rolling. I'm guessing that there were some pretty good discussions, and based on kind of wandering around and listening in a little bit, and also seeing what you've put together. We don't have time to like fully debrief and spend a whole bunch of time having everyone share their ideas and every nuance that you went through, because that would take an hour or more, because it took you an hour to generate it. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a dive into each of these topics. And we're going to start with the medical school. And what I would like each of your tables to do, so I'm going to call on your table. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me which circle or dot in some cases was the smallest. Which one represented the least change possibility? Okay, so I'm going to start. We're talking about the medical school, and Brandy, for your table, which one, authority, acceptance, or ability, was the smallest? So they were all equal. Was there a giant overlap in the middle? All right, you're going to quietly talk amongst yourself and get your team on that. It's sort of unfair because I didn't tell you beforehand, but that's because I didn't want you to like go to an answer. Okay. All right. So Jill, for the medical school idea, authority, ability, or acceptance, which one was the smallest? Oh, well, there's a drawing over there and everything. Okay, that's cool. So acceptance was the smallest circle for you in that one. Okay. Let's see, Brandon. Authority. Okay. All right. So over here, Heather, for your team. Yeah. Okay. Acceptance. All right. Amber.
The six said that they were all maybe a little more equal, but the overlap was all red. And then we had a couple of people who said acceptance
Was the smallest. Okay. So you had 2 out of the 6-ish said acceptance smallest. 4 out of the 6. They're all okay. 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 That's interesting. I want to come back to that. All right. So Ron, how about your table?
Ability, all red.
Ability was all red. Okay. Brandy, I'm going to come back to you.
Okay, so I asked my team.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. They said acceptance.
Okay, acceptance. Okay, so quite a few places had acceptance. Okay, but one table had ability, right? And one table had authority. Is that right? No, over here. Which one? Over here, you were authority? Okay. Anybody from the table that had ability and authority as the smallest, did anybody have acceptance as the biggest? Like the most, like you had the most acceptance?
It was a tie.
It was a tie.
Authority and acceptance.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to this table. What about authority makes you think it's not possible? Yeah, small circle. Yep. Yep. Okay, so no affiliation with a current medical school to start that up. Okay. All right. How about when it comes to ability, why was that all red for this table?
I think the ability kind of ties into that. We felt there was a lack of understanding just how to make it successful. We just don't have
Okay.
any existing expertise to draw from, so we would have to bring that in It would be a big experiment. We are currently struggling at our existing facility to retain and hire faculty, so how would we do that for something with our facility?
Okay. So we haven't done it before,
Yeah.
right? So we don't have that know-how. And there are challenges with one of our current institutions. So we don't feel like that's a transferable know-how. Okay, so the ability challenge is know-how based. Okay, all right, that's fair. Okay, all right, so who wants to talk on, we have a couple minutes, let's talk on acceptance a little bit. Let's start back in this corner. Heather, your team was acceptance, right? Was the smallest or the biggest challenge? Most reddest.
This is something that actually has come up more than once.
Okay.
And hasn't moved. So there is somewhere that link is broken.
Okay.
And it does become a topic, but it doesn't then move beyond. And is it not broad enough acceptance even beyond that? Like, are we not asking it, or is it more niche than we realize? And we're not maybe seeing a big picture need, or not asking the big picture people and get that. Are we not good?
Okay. Okay, so because it has been sort of tried and maybe failed, you feel like that indicates that it's somewhere along the way acceptance was the challenge. And
That's like when it comes up and everyone kind of gets wound up about it, and then and everyone's like, oh, okay, well maybe that's not as big of a problem. Maybe that isn't a thing, and so then I think even if maybe there was.
okay. All right. Who else had acceptance? Right? This table had acceptance as your smallest, right? And they broke you.
We have a lot of the similar comments that Heather's group did, but there's a small group that we know are in support, but not big enough group. So
Okay.
acceptance seems small.
Okay.
And same way with on the funding mechanism, like there was small hurdles that we couldn't get over before. So that no is a hard one to overcome.
Okay. Okay. So there's some baggage. Okay. How about this table with all red? That sounded exciting. You gotta, okay. So tell me about that. Yeah.
We thought we have a limited social capital, first of all, and so is this really the hill that we want to die on? Because it's a big hill, and then we would have other things to do, so we have to prioritize this. We've got acceptance wise, the constituents probably would put this as a priority, because I didn't see as much impact as potentially other projects. That currently we have a really low population, and the physical infrastructure of medical school, of UW to medical school, and medical school to rural populations just isn't there. So we don't have teaching hospitals, we don't have hospital systems set up for that. We don't have the population or demand for people graduating medical school to have practices that actually make money, because we already have like the whammy in place, and we're not getting people to come back even after whammy.
Ooh.
So
That's
the
interesting.
nursing is already built out. We have a university right now, community colleges that we don't want to dilute. So we just think that there's a lot of hurdles that aren't necessarily being met by this.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. Last group on acceptance, right?
About how we felt like we do have some that they would support that, like we know that there's a need in the field. We talked about definitely the need for legislative buy-in, of
Mhm.
course. And then we also talked a little bit about higher education. Things are happening like it. The
under authority. Some things are happening at or the K-12 level. But we felt like we needed to get higher education to accept it.
All right, very cool. Very cool. All right, now we're gonna jump to the next topic, which is the statewide economic development tax. Okay, now I'm gonna throw this idea out there. I could be totally wrong, but I'm guessing that most groups said that acceptance is going to be a problem. Is that correct? Raise your hand if your group thinks acceptance is the biggest challenge with the statewide economic development tax. So right now we have 4, and then we have somebody who's doing this. What was your biggest challenge?
Yeah, we were comparing some state, like what it would look like at the state and what's happened at the local, and that's where our ability was kind of a little bit, maybe we weren't, we didn't.
So yeah. Like that's what they talked about, but this is what you said. Okay, so yeah. I know, I get it. But and the reason I'm not marginalizing that because that's super important. But I do want to say that there's an awful lot of red on a lot of things over here. 2 of those things have BRC attached to them, and there's a ton of red in acceptance. There's also a lot of red in acceptance here. Okay, and I'm guessing that the good news is as you talked about this, you probably realize that yes, acceptance is a big challenge.
And I think that we bounce back and forth between acceptance and ability.
Okay.
And trying to maybe figure out which one kind of had to give, or if acceptance became higher and turned green, would that then?
Oh. Cool. Okay. So you did like some modeling, some predictive modeling. I like it. Okay. Now again, I can't wait. I do want to hear a little bit about what your group thought was the biggest challenge in that. Was it authority or ability or acceptance?
We are all green on all 3. But there was one person, a little greener shade of pale.
Yeah, Procol Harum. Good. Okay.
Yeah, we were.
Everybody was in acceptance on that one. Okay.
But we accepted because of education, to educate the people what
Yeah.
we're gonna use it.
Okay.
We talked a lot, I think, I was a convert from, like, my red stickers up there, but as we talked about, like, oh, but actually, if we use our ability to do X, Y, Z, the acceptance actually, like, oh, that doesn't seem like it's a challenge. After all, we just to use our ability, which we are all very, like, we're beyond capable.
Of doing.
So
Okay.
once we talked about that, then everybody was like, oh, acceptance is actually not red, we are all.
Okay.
We thought acceptance, it's more transparent. There seems potentially be more of an appetite for sales tax rather than the property tax.
Okay. So there might actually, like it might be in fashion right now to have a sales tax definitely rather than, not in addition to, but okay. But so I think of the groups who said acceptance was a challenge, was there what I want to do instead of asking you what was stopping you, and this is a question for everybody, I want to ask you the flip of that. I want to ask you, are there groups of people or subgroups of people or individuals who would accept it and promote the idea of a statewide economic development tax? So of the, for everyone in the room, just raise your hand and let's talk about who might accept it and promote it. Who might? Who would do that? Patrick. Okay, so municipalities might be very interested in this revenue stream to do economic development. Okay, who else? Yeah, Randy.
We talked about citizens might accept it
because if we tell our narrative and we develop the plan, we're offering hope.
Okay, so in your group, you talked about how the citizens might actually want it. Probably not the loudest citizens, but the majority who probably shouldn't be silent forever. And, but they would see it as a way to provide hope and like invest in the future. That's what your group talked about? Okay.
Yeah, a plan of how it works.
How it works. Yes.
We could
Okay.
say
Sure.
if that money got collected, how it gets treated, that was like
Right.
one spot for us, so we didn't know how to go.
Okay. Okay.
Like, are we distributing it, or is it getting distributed like any other sales tax? We
Okay.
got a whole team of very detailed oriented people.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Because those details are going to be important because voters are going to ask the same question, right? Voters would ask the same question of their legislators, like, why did you do that? What's the plan for it? All those kinds of things. Okay. But to me, that's a really good sign that it's likely that citizens would actually say, with the right education, with an understanding of the process, how could this benefit us and our future? Okay. Great. Yeah, Jill. Okay, so groups like the Business Alliance who represent businesses could perhaps carry that forward. Again, if their members said that, yes, this makes sense. Yes, we want to have this. Yes, we can see a path to a better future. Okay. Yeah, Brandon.
That was what Eric said, we had an economic sales tax.
Yeah. Right. 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 And I think that is a strategy that a lot of municipalities who have instituted those, fifth and sixth penny taxes utilize. It's not about being punitive. It's about what does this allow us to do? What does it enable us to do? And how does it help us benefit from the right incentive? Right. Okay. Okay, good. Derek.
Leveraging our folks who are great at analysis internally to, okay, we have our team of thousands. What's the reach of them within the community? Looking at, say, Casper, okay, what would be the vote? Let's say it wasn't a statewide through the legislature. In that analysis, who do you really need to engage and how many people? Then focus on that one-on-one. 30,000 votes in Casper, we've already got 5. What do we need to push this over the hump?
So kind of a networking or connection analysis to understand what groups they could engage. Okay. Amber. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Constituency not only have the narrative and the education, but they also can do good things.
Yep.
So that they have the skill sets to make sure that those are what they're so that they can.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, absolutely, Connor.
Patrick said that mayor's office.
So the state wouldn't take care of them though. This is a tax that is generated at the local level and kept at the local level. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
Skip that step.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. I like that. Think about that. Good. Yeah, Chris.
So thought based on making the transparency of the reporting the rules and regulations. It helps to increase the visibility around population growth.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. Good. All right, we're going to take the last few minutes. I want to recap a few things about what was said in a couple different pockets. So many of you know that we have we sort of have this approach where we're going to take an idea and we're going to experiment with it in various ways within our what I call our sphere of influence. So what are the things that we can change in order to test out some of these ideas? Okay. And then once we understand them a little bit better, or we can show some results, that makes it so that we can maybe move it into another section called rules, right? Like we'll take BRC as an example, because BRC as a program could be similar to what people might use at a local level. Okay. So if you think about it for a second, then we practice, then we put the things that work really, really well into rules, and that codifies them a little bit more. They're a little, it's maybe more like liquid over here, gelatin over here. Maybe statutes are like, I don't know, that rubbery gym floor stuff from back in the 80s, if anybody remembers that. And then maybe the Constitution is not quite stone, but it's a little harder to change, right? You've got that whole path. Well, I want to remind everybody of something that I think is pretty cool, is that we have been experimenting with the idea of building local revenue for economic development in a lot of different ways. And one of the projects happened right here in Natrona County with Mesa Solutions. And that was the incremental increase in tax, property tax, I believe it was, is going to be utilized for economic development, or portion of it. That's an experiment that says, hey, you grew and you benefited from it, and economic development funds were developed. Like, that's us taking the liquidy part of that and using it in order to understand if that's going to be a lever that would work. Then we said, I heard somebody say, well, then the local communities might be able to do some things or leverage more state funds and things like that. That's what our rules are saying, right? Like there are now pieces of our rules that say the community match needs to be a little higher. We're asking the communities to come with more. That was something that was liquid a few board meetings ago. You probably remember it, right? I know at least one board member who was pretty direct about it. I loved it. And now that's into rule. And so the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis are going to find their way into rule and statute. And the way that we socialize those ideas is by practicing them, testing them out, working with them, moving them into a little bit more rigid structure, and then a place where we can utilize that for the entire state. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And because we've already been doing it, these aren't crazy ideas that nobody has ever tried before. It's more like, hey, these are extensions of work we've already been doing. And now, because again, we're looking at more of the change space, we're going to know what to work on. So what I want to talk with you a little bit about is, we didn't say this before you went into your groups, but as Team Wyoming, we realize that reality says that some of these dots or circles are dots. They're small. Some of them don't even exist on the page. If you were to draw out a little bitty circle for acceptance, I bet some of you were like, that's not going to happen. We're all red. Okay. Now that is a description of today. That's not what we do though. Describing today, that's not what we do. We focus on the possible. We're trying to figure out, how do we not make tomorrow look like today? That's what this group does. That's in the decisions we make as a board. That's in the experiments we run as a team. All of those things are, how do we fix the situation or change the situation to make it better, not to describe it. Describing it is for a computer. I guarantee you, you could put this prompt into AI and they could describe this perfectly. It's not a problem. But we're not about describing the problem. We're about changing it. And so what I really want everyone to think about is, who are we waiting for? Who are we waiting for to come in and tell us to do that? Did anybody say this is not our job? We should not be deciding that. Did anybody say that? It's okay if you did. It happens. I get it. It's a change. And I'm glad that not a ton of people raised their hand. It would have been way more awkward to be like, it actually is us. It is our job to come up with these things. It's actually not just our job to do it, it's the time to do it. Because there is a giant vacuum of big ideas out there. They're not out there. We need to put them in. We need to be the ones that propose them and work on them and have the disagreements that turn all of the little red dots that were over there in an hour. In an hour, you went from all red dots, almost all red dots in acceptance, to no red dots. It's not impossible. In fact, it's completely possible. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think is really cool. And I want you to share, if you don't mind, and if you want to, what is your vision for the future? What do you think Wyoming could be? Because the 5 ideas on the board here, that's a start. That's just a start. But what's the vision for the future? There. So Wyoming should be a place that people can grow into, not out of. Nice, thank you. You would like to see Wyoming be empowered instead of waiting or being responsive, but empowered. I like it. Thank you. Patrick. As a place for opportunity. Mark, and then Kate. You want Wyoming's future to be based on human innovation. Cool. Kate.
I want people in Wyoming to want to follow.
Okay, you want people to want to be involved in making the change, not being forced to or opposed, maybe. Okay, good. Yeah, Connor. So growth as a tool to grow into who we are, not out of who we are, right? Growth as a positive, not a negative. Okay, good. Melissa.
On the ground level, K-12 education, side by side with jobs and higher education, just works with all those groups. Those 3 groups work together and have city government all supporting.
Okay, so K-12 working with business and industry to kind of create an employment pipeline as well as the university systems or higher education, and then working together with the communities to grow it in the right way. Okay. Business and industry led initiatives. I like it. All right, Randy. Randy would like our population to exceed 1 million. Don't worry, everyone afraid of density will still be really, really low in density. Mark. Yeah, density is a different conversation in Europe, isn't it? Yep. Yep. Yeah, we can handle 1 million. We can handle 1 million. Yeah, Derek.
Where innovation and new ideas are embraced as tightly as current legacy.
So a state where innovation and say the other part.
Innovation and
New ideas are embraced as tightly. Yeah, innovation and new ideas are embraced as tightly as our existing legacy industries. Doesn't seem so bad, does it? Word "and" is not a problem, right? That's a good word. Okay, Sarah, and then Bruce. Oh, did you read? Oh, sorry, Bruce.
I'd like to see Wyoming become a state where it's not dependent on natural resources.
A state that's not dependent. I'm going to say not totally dependent. How's that sound? I'm going to add a little bit to that one. Not totally
Yeah,
dependent.
without natural resources.
And also, you know what? Here's the deal. What if we had both? What would, that would be awesome, right? Let's keep them. We got them. Let's use them. Yeah, Noel. So you would like to see a state where people have access to the basic needs: clean drinking water, healthcare, maternal care, childcare, take care of our people. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, Heather. So a place where Wyoming actually exists to the outside world, and that people are, maybe people are extremely excited about or sort of jealous of what Wyomingites have. Okay, good. Yeah, Brandon. So you want to live in a place where Wyomingites are so excited about the state that they're telling other people about the cool things that are happening, not the old things that happened. Okay. Derek.
I'd love to see why we have that same thought inside ourselves. And instead of worrying about what the high school football rivalry was, we shared in Maple County 40 years ago, point at other cities in the state and go, wow, that's really cool what they're doing. That's really cool what we're doing, what they're doing. Support everyone across.
Because we're Team Wyoming. I like it. You'd like it to be Team Wyoming, not Camels versus Bronx.
Be a nice change.
Be nice. I like that. That might be a great place to end today's work session. And so I hope today opened your mind in new ways. The idea for today was really to help you see maybe a different perspective on some of the big ideas that are out there, and maybe see that there is work no matter what, and no matter how great the idea is, there's a lot of work to make that change happen. And I also hope you saw that discussing these ideas with others, especially if those others maybe had a different point of view than you, could result in maybe more acceptance, maybe a better idea, maybe a way for us to move forward in areas that have been tried and have failed. Welcome to the world. That's how it works. None of these ideas could have or would have likely happened on the first try. That's not how it works. But you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And if we don't start taking some shots, we'll never hit one in the goal. That's just how it works. And so we've got to take shots because nobody else is going to tell us to take shots. We don't need anybody to tell us to take shots. We can take shots and we can deal with and we can understand and we can educate so that we can get where we're going. The discussions that these shots will create are how Wyoming moves forward. These are not the silver bullets. These are many of the solutions that we're going to need. But what's happening when these solutions become implemented or become discussed is we're building the muscles, we're building the know-how, we're building the way that change will be created in a state. That's the muscle we're trying to build. Yeah, we build a medical school, build a railway for passengers, get a 1 cent economic development tax. That's the outcome, but the work to get there is what we're really trying to do. That's where the muscle is built, and that's what's going to serve us in the future. But if we never take these shots, we'll never build those muscles. So thanks for having some fun today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got to know some of the new board members. Thank you for traveling up here and working together with the team. And we will, I think if Courtney is around, she can help. If she's not, then you guys should know where you're going for dinner. Gaslight Social, I believe. Does anybody know what time? 6 o'clock, Gaslight Social. That's where we'll be. All right. Thank y'all.